you have to hide reality in like a sea of lies, because you can't hide, the internet is too easy to find. You can't hide it in plain sight, and you can't paywall it, really, right? If for important stuff.
Greetings, friends. Welcome to another episode of More or Less. How are the Morans and the Sam lesson?
Great.
Doing good.
Another beautiful day in paradise.
Another beautiful day in paradise. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm fine.
Are you drinking a beer?
It's non-alcoholic Peroni.
Okay.
I went for a run. I mostly cleared my inbox. Just kind of doing the summer thing.
It's summer.
It is summer.
I'm writing a long diatribe about Harvard. So, just chill.
Ooh, Sam, do you want to plug the forum? It's been a while.
Oh, yeah. How's the forum going?
Forum's great. Forum's big and growing and really quite well liked. But yeah, if you're interested in what's going on, 1636forum.org. We have tens of thousands of people reading our weekly newsletter, which is kind of the axios of Harvard for what's going on and hopefully how to fix it.
Not the Business Insider.
No, I mean that's a different.
It's not
product.
the information of Harvard. We could
no, it's definitely. Well, it's all about excerpting. I'm sorry, it's actually 1636forum.com, not .org. For what it's worth.
I was wondering why you went with .org. You answered my question.
No, it's .com. In fact, I think that .org is something completely unrelated, so don't go to that. Yeah, that's some sort of leadership forum with a guy named Phil Eng. So that's not what we're talking about.
No.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, there's I'm trying to pull up some summer thinking, having spent an enormous amount of time on this over the last 8 months of what is actually going on in the path forward, because it's complicated. But, there's signs of optimism.
Is there a overarching thrust to the narrative right now?
I mean, where I'm at in my drafting is kind of setting up the big picture problems, right, of which there's a handful of just societal ones that are very much impacting Harvard, that start with things like a real lack of having a common enemy post-Cold War and the West turning on itself, and lack of achievable purpose because people can't afford kids and houses, and like what that trickles through. And then I'm going kind of group by group, because there's a set of faculty problems, some of which are broad, some of which are very Harvard specific based on a series of errors of the last 10 years in terms of how they hire and blah, blah, blah. Students, how they're recruited, who gets admitted, and then campus culture, administrators, government. I'm just trying to pull it up in like a short form because there's a lot. It's a lot, guys.
Yeah. Well, I will say my observation is Sam is a good person to bring around to dinner parties these days, because it turns out that the summering business people on the East Coast want very much to constantly hear his opinions.
They
about
all
Harvard,
read the forum. It's great. It's a pretty funny.
Read the forum.
Yeah, I think it says more about who we go to dinner with in the summer than it does anything else. But
maybe you should change your dinner friends.
Sam, do you wear white slacks and loafers to your East Coast dinners? Because I was just there for a few days last week, as Jess knows, and I don't think Dave would ever fit in there. I'm sorry, it wouldn't work out.
I think Dave would
fashion-wise.
struggle. But I got stuff like a Gray Barn T-shirt. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, you do. You're sporting.
I do have the pedigree. I just don't have the outfit.
Mushroom is $70. Yes. Do they sell mushrooms? I don't know. They're like a cheese thing.
Though, the funny part is I don't think I've ever actually set foot in Gray Barn. I've certainly had things from it, but have I ever?
I don't even know what that is.
I've been by it 1,000 times.
It's a state of mind. It's just like it's like
it's the why not pay more state of mind.
Yeah, I just
is Montana.
No, Gray Barn is a different level of overpriced. Montana has some steps to go.
No, I'm saying Montana's also a state of mind.
Oh, it's a state of mind. Yeah, it's
a summer state of mind.
Okay, I'm gonna pivot. I'm gonna take brands that are state of mind and pivot to this conference that Britt and I attended last week. Britt and I got to hang out. Is this like a
confidential conference? Are you allowed to talk about this?
No, it was all over social media.
The content is confidential, but you were encouraged to take pictures and share. And our friend Amy Griffin brings together every year 100, 150?
No, it was
I don't
200.
know.
I counted the rows.
200. Britt counted the rows.
I did the math while I was listening.
Okay. Really paying attention.
That's a lot of Kamala votes in one room.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But here are I have many observations, some of which I can't share. But Britt, I gotta say, I am proud. We were the only two people who didn't get the fashion memo that in the summer you wear white in the Hamptons.
Yeah. Guys, I'm from Texas and then moved straight to California. I've never been
How
a
did you get
Northeast
that wrong,
person.
Jess?
Yeah, you should have known this and told me. Why didn't you tell me this?
Well, okay, I've been living out of a suitcase, so I went with what I had, which was fine. But I walk in, the first person I meet is the Duchess of Sussex, who it is known that she was there. This is public. I'm not
Was she
revealing.
wearing white? What does she care about wearing
Her name
white?
tag said Megan Sussex. That was her name tag.
Well, that's her name.
That's her name?
Yeah. Because your house becomes your last name.
Your last name? Okay, that was new for me.
Yeah. But anyway, she was wearing a light beige. Thank you for asking. And
see?
It's a shade of white.
She didn't care.
No, light beige is a shade of white.
No.
Yeah.
That's because she's like a counterculture figure, though, right?
Yeah,
she's like,
exactly.
fuck the establishment. I'm wearing off-white.
Yeah, she like moved out of the establishment to California.
well, you
Come
guys,
on.
I will say I'm going to another event in the Hamptons tomorrow night and I'm wearing white. I'm not making this mistake again. I felt very self-conscious for a second.
Oh
and then I
no,
got
what's
over
going
it.
to happen? You're going to have to return to California and, with your tail
I can't
between your
wait
legs.
to get back to California. I can wear Viore
Boo-hoo.
and
Viore.
I don't have to think about this. But okay, so that's one not substantive observation.
My takeaway from this conference is I was excited about the free granola that came back from this conference. It's not that good. It tastes like the bag.
Sam, what about the cleanse? I saved that for you because I don't cleanse.
I will do the
Oh, the
cleanse at some
Chroma. Chroma. I've talked about Chroma on the pod before. Remember when you talked about Prolon and I said, no, there's one called Chroma. That's
I like
better.
Prolon. But I don't know. I was very disappointed in this granola. So was our nanny who's with me. She agrees with me that it tastes like the bag. So
Okay.
Okay. What other observations did you have, Jess?
What observations? Okay. What I really like about this event is there are actually some really, really awesome women. And it is a wonderful intersection of Hollywood, tech, and finance in New York. And I just think that is it's very cool. And people were genuinely very interested in being there and learning from each other. Like a really awesome actress who I will not name, but who was fabulous in Palm Royale and Big Little Lies, and also very sweet to me, was just taking notes. And I was like, that's so cool. So it was and obviously with Kamala Harris, which wasn't really overtly talked about, but was a lot of lunchtime conversation. People are very interesting. And I think it's very easy to get in your lane. And obviously the business and tech world and everything everyone's in many lanes. You have people who are actresses and entrepreneurs and investors. So I think it is very unique in pulling together that group. But Britt, what did you think?
Well, I think like most conferences, it's always the side conversations in the hallway or the lunches that are the most interesting. And they actually seated us at the lunch table. So you were at a random table with people, but I was sitting by some fashion designers that are really well known. And I just spun the whole conversation into what they think about AI because I'm genuinely curious to get out of my tech bubble and ask normal people, but still really well-known people what they think. And they weren't as scared of it as I expected, but they also just really didn't know much about it. I was actually surprised by how little they knew.
my take wandering on the East Coast and talking to people on the East Coast about AI that know nothing about AI is, boy, do they have opinions and believe it's going to take over everything.
Guys, you should have been there when a very well-meaning person looked at us and she's like, it's coming faster than you expect. And I'm like, Sam, don't say it.
Which Sam? You're like, oh no, Sam Altman got to her.
Well, Sam Altman definitely got to her.
Yeah.
She's been reading a lot of New York Times. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, so that is definitely the misconceptions of the summer crowds. I agree with that, but I'm just trying to think if there's any last.
I think I'm just surprised that the Hamptons is this networking-y. Has it always been? I feel like
that's what it is.
I feel like every year is more and more. Like I see, it's like South by Southwest for a whole summer. There's a new party every night.
It's the East Coast, Britt.
I feel like it's getting stronger. Like people from the West Coast are now going to the Hamptons way more than the people from the East Coast.
Haven't you ever seen, Weekend at Bernie's? It's been this way since the 80s.
Yeah. This is like how it's always been.
There might be less like cocaine than there used to be and more networking events, but like,
have you seen Wolf of Wall Street?
There's two, Brett. I think
or Secession or anything about the East Coast business culture.
I think the tech people are just sort of a little more present because, like,
the tech people are coming more than they ever have.
Is it just that the tech people have more money and so now they have to join the establishment?
No, they know that networking is happening there, and so they're like figuring out how to rent a house there for like a couple weeks.
Or you can just rent a house in Cape Cod and fly in and out. I mean, that's also the way to go.
The tech people are surfing more. Gotta say it. Party tomorrow is a surf party. Is
the surfing that good out there, Jess?
No, it's not.
I mean, but you can surf. And Montauk is surf culture, which is 80% of surfing, Dave.
Which is that you stand around and look at surfboards. And
that's almost as bad as flying to the East Coast to go skiing. Like,
exactly.
I don't know. Okay. Well, I can't wait for everyone to make fun of us on our discovery of the Hamptons. But I will say the last thing, I've enjoyed going to this event for many years. And when I arrived this year, I thought to myself, wow, everyone is half their size. And I said
half
something to
what do you mean?
Half their size.
Ozempic.
Like,
Ozempic is in the wild.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, this is weird. Everyone's half their size and wearing white. This is a cult. No, but then I turned to a good friend and I said, what is going on? And she just said, New York is full of people who are 120 pounds and then become 100 on Ozempic. And I thought that was very sad. And it is actually a huge shift.
Makes it easier to pick up.
But I mean, isn't this what we were talking about a year ago? Like this was I think we've got episodes where we were wondering whether this is what was going to happen and you just confirmed it.
No, we were just asserting it's going to happen. I mean, the good news is companies like Blade, who are taking all these 100-pound people to the Hamptons, are going to make more money. They'll save on fuel.
They're super psyched. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like a huge cost saving for them.
Coming down. Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't cost a lot to lift 100 pounds.
It's different. I look for the delta. Okay.
How about the dogs? Are the dogs scaling getting smaller too, or the pocket dogs still the same size?
Dogs are the same size.
There were no dogs at the event.
Purses are bigger. Actually. People are smaller. Dogs are the same size.
Can you fit the people in the purses? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like...
Next topic, Jess. Let's move it forward.
Okay. We got to keep it moving. Okay. So out of the whatever's happening in the summer to people's brains, real news is happening. It's actually earnings season, guys, which may not seem...
Is it a season if it happens 4 times a year?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Like, why is it a season?
Because there are 4 seasons.
Isn't it just the earnings time?
Because the analysts on the CNBC call it a season. And therefore, that's what we're going to do. But we've had Meta and Microsoft so far in kind of different stories. Microsoft did not meet expectations for cloud growth, and investors weren't happy, but then they got a little less unhappy. But slower growth than expected in cloud. And higher costs than expected. So
but isn't that just exactly what we've been talking about? That AI is just a cloud business.
Okay.
It's going to run into the same problems. And here we are.
I'm trying to educate the people on the news, and you guys can just say, this
Let
is
me
what...
go a step further in terms of, we told you so.
Okay.
Like, we told you so. This is so fucking obvious. You're Meta. You can turn the crank on incremental AI and make fuck tons of money on ads,
which is what happened. Right? So Meta outperformed expectations.
It's like, if you just listen to us, you understand that this is obviously what's going to happen. So sure, they're going to like light a bunch of money on fire, but no one cares, right? Because they have an actual use case for AI. Microsoft actually has to sell the fucking AI, right? Because that's the whole thing. Is not they can't use it. They got to actually sell it, and it turns out that no one knows other than unless you're Meta, you turn your crank on ads and customizing copy and conversion rates and micro targeting. People don't want to make money on this shit. So yeah, like duh, in terms of how this is going to play out. Any analyst who's surprised by any of this or expresses surprise is just not smart. Like this is just not rocket science.
Okay, what's going to happen to Nvidia, Sam?
It's going to be fine for a while, but it's going to crash because it's kind of experimental spend. So in the ads world, right, or if you like back in the day, right, there's this whole question of you're a Snapchat and you get these budgets from people. And the question is it real budget with ROI or is it just experimental budget from the fuck it, we'll try it? And it's really dangerous to be an experimental budget because you haven't proven anything. You're just fucking around. And most of Nvidia's spend right now is fucking around spend, right? Like people do not know how to make money. Yeah, people don't know how to make money on this shit. And more importantly, this is the really big thing, Dave, is people are racking all of these Nvidia servers and then underutilizing them, right?
That's true.
And so that's really dangerous, right? Like it's a great story. And I do think that Nvidia is probably, there's a narrative, for a while, which I think will eventually happen, which is this stuff is all going to get commoditized. It will, but it'll take a while. Like Nvidia clearly has a lead in a bunch of this stuff. It won't get. But the big problem for them is like if the spending is all speculative / fake / people buying up these servers as effectively Bitcoin, right? But not like with any fundamental use for them. I think it's a very dangerous position for them. So it's hard. You can't short Nvidia.
Most of the you asserted most of this usage fall. I mean, clearly some of the usage falls into this camp of underutilization, but you think the big tech codes that are hoarding H100s are not using them?
No, well, I think here's what's happening. Most people that are buying them, the academic researchers, whatever, from everyone I've spoken to, don't know how to use them, right? So they're underutilizing them. They're only like using a single thread on them. The academics don't know how to use them. They're just kind of, now that is a small amount because mostly it's people like the biggest platforms that are buying them and putting them into cloud services in various forms. And then most of that's being used on training stuff, which is not profitable. So when you actually kind of flow it through, you say, what of the NVIDIA spend is actually productive, valuable spend? It's not that much. I mean, OpenAI is losing a shitload of money. People like Meta will hoard these things. And sure, they'll experiment with them, but there isn't like $1 in, $1.50 out on any of this stuff, right? And until there is, it's all very, very risky.
So I have one thought on this, which is that I've been experimenting with the iOS 18.1 release, which includes Apple's intelligence update. And there are a couple things about it that are really shocking. The first one is that I believe they call it smart replies, which is anytime you're text messaging or writing an email, the keyboard automatically suggests like entire sentences for you to include into what you're doing. And the first time it started doing it, it really kind of shocked me. Like I was taken aback by how effective it is. It's far better than, say, Gmail's autocomplete stuff. And then the second thing that's shocking is there's a photo feature, which I don't know what it's called. I think it's called Magic Moments or something like that, where you can type in, show me all of the photos skiing with Sam in Jackson Hole. And it automatically generates album using this pretty magical UI. And the thing that it made me think about was in the 90s and the 2000s, when the personal computing revolution was going on, and we were all buying personal computers with a Pentium this or a Pentium that in it, or a Nvidia, chip this or that in it. There were use cases that you were using, like back then it was rendering videos or it was playing a game of some kind, where you knew that when the chip got faster, you would be excited to do that use case more. And this photo use case on my phone is actually the first AI use case where I am sitting here going, I can't wait for this to happen faster. And will Apple actually improve the speed of the chip? Will they put a native LLM chip on board? I think the answer to that question is probably yes. Will Nvidia get into, providing these like smaller LLM chips to every Android device in the world? And will that become a profit center for them? Because I agree with you that on the server and cloud side, you're absolutely right. But using these use cases in the last week, I've just been kind of shocked at how much I feel like a kid in a candy store with computing again, where I'm like, I know this is going to be awesome when it's faster and more local.
I agree with that. I mean, I think especially, I'm happy that over the years I've oversampled and just I take so many photographs. So many is completely useless, right? But like in some ways, I feel like I've been preparing for the AI exactly photo album generation, this new amazing stuff with it. So like I'm into it. I think the question of how you think about value in a world of such discontinuity is just really interesting, right? Because like in some ways, in a world of very high unpredictability, right? Maybe Nvidia does do something awesome. Maybe they don't, right? If it's awesome, it might be huge. Then you can come up with reasons to own things. Then how do you put that against consistent execution, profitability, the defensibility of what they do, the value of what they do? I think we're just in a very chaotic period here, and that makes value very, very hard to assign in most of these things.
Sure.
So I would never short Nvidia because that is a crazy fucking idea, right? Like, I think part of the reason that some of these things rip is because people should be rightly terrified to short them. But then you go back to basics of like how they're making money and how valuable is what they're producing and how sticky is the revenue. And you're like, I'm not so sure.
It's certainly probably not going to look like what it's looked like for the last 18 months, right? Like, even if they transition into something that looks more like what their graphic chips looked like for years, it's not going to have the same growth rates that we were seeing.
Except for people saying no, because it's not actually about any of the chip stuff. It's actually their software management platform for it and blah, blah. I mean, there's all sorts of narratives, right?
I don't know about that, but
all I'm saying is, like, until people are consistently making money on AI, which no one is other than Meta, it's just a very chaotic period. And
Microsoft is making money. Microsoft,
and Google.
but they're not really, Jess. Like, they're making money.
I guess making is, what do you mean by making?
Google likely is.
But I know how Meta is. How is Google? Is Google doing the same thing with their ads optimization?
They must be. They have to be.
They've already announced that.
One would assume they are.
Google invented this stuff. They must.
Then that's fine. I mean, that's totally reasonable that is the story, which is like you literally put $1 into a chip and you get money back. Microsoft is not making money on this stuff. They're putting a bunch of features out, right, that are of questionable value in terms of expanding wallet and da-da-da-da. And then there's reselling a bunch of this stuff, which is predicated on the premise that someone else knows how to make money on it, which they don't.
Except maybe the Copilot stuff, right? Like,
but even that is tiny.
I think Amazon is the one I keep waiting for more news on.
I think there'll be more, but to finish this point, I read in the information that TikTok is paying Microsoft $20 million a month to access OpenAI through Azure. So that's one company.
Doesn't it account for 25% of its revenue or something like that? It's like
I also
the biggest.
Read that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's interesting because like that could be real, right? That actually because TikTok.
Look at that.
No. Think about it. Just think that 20% could be real because if TikTok is actually using this shit to make their videos more, like to get the algorithm right, and there's actually value associated with it, then fine. That's another legit use case where there's chip in, money out. In theory, I mean, I would be just as convinced given the shenanigans with TikTok and how all their stuff predates a lot of this stuff that they're writing that check every month for political reasons, right? As much as anything else, and they don't actually need it. But who knows would be the question.
They probably need it. They're facing a big profitability push too over at ByteDance. I don't think they're wasting any money over there. But Britt, you have also identified some developments in the consumer AI arena.
Well, if we go back to 2024 predictions, one of my predictions was that we will all just be talking out loud to ourselves and our AI devices way more by the end of this year. And not only are a lot of people continuing to talk about GPT's voice features or Pi. We just had dinner with someone recently that was like, I can't get enough of Pi. I spent a 5-hour car ride just talking to Pi. But now, if you go to friends.com, yes, a company
Good domain. Someone paid a lot for that.
$1.8 million. They said
that's
that they paid for this
cheaper
domain.
than I would think. Really? Friend or friends?
Friends.ai.
How much?
Friends.
Who's got friend.com? Because it is actually only
I think Facebook. I remember us buying that in the early days.
Really?
Here's the funny thing: is like it actually isn't. The chip thing is not a friends. It's a friend, right? I guess they just couldn't get it.
The founder
we had all
Friend.
The trademarks and domains on this stuff early Facebook.
Wait, is
I'm
it Friend?
certain.
Hold on. Friend. It is friend.com. Friend.
Yeah, I'm on Friend and it looks like
not
it's
Friend.
Okay, that makes more sense because like it's a singular friend.
Founded by Avi Schiffman, who, do you guys remember when COVID started? The first ever sort of graph of how COVID was spreading was put up on this random website. This was this guy's website. He was like a 19-year-old at the time. He dropped out of Harvard, out of all places, and he played around with a few startups, now made his way to friend.com, which is a $99 AI device that you wear as a necklace. It looks like an AirTag, and it just listens to you all day long. And randomly, not like you don't ask it to, it'll just text you with like a funny joke you should insert into the conversation, something it's thinking about based on what you've been saying all day. And it's going to be shipping in early 2025.
I love the idea of a company that's like, here, why don't you AirTag yourself?
It's AirTag that's listening to you, basically.
Just put a collar on.
So the one thing I will say is that there's a great app called Dot, which is a former Apple designer that started a AI app. And it's similar but different in that you give it access to your calendar and you answer some questions, which of all of these apps that I've tried, it's by far the best. And I've actually kind of found it delightful over the last month. It'll send me a message each day, and he sort of frames it as a journal rather than a friend that you're talking to. And I've actually enjoyed interacting with it. It's the first one of these that I've felt that way about. And
to be clear, thematically, this is both obvious and going to happen. And actually, one thing I will say about it is it's a lot easier than the assistant thing. So, like, why not? Right?
Sure.
Like, it's like.
So just to pause, you guys are okay with some startup recording everything you say all day?
Okay, it says everything is encrypted.
Dot doesn't do that. Yeah.
And the one caveat, I read all the FAQs because I was so interested in how this thing works. So everything is encrypted. You own the data, blah, blah, blah. But if the device breaks or you lose it, you're fucked. Like there's no backup in any, like nothing's backed up anywhere.
It's stored on device. It's not backed
It's
up
only
in the cloud.
stored on device. Yeah.
No, it can't only be stored on the device. It doesn't have
That's
the
what
memory.
it says in the FAQs. Read the FAQ.
And $99, that LLM ain't smart. I mean, for
Look,
$99.
it doesn't
might
need to
be.
be because it can just offload it all, right? It just offloads it and doesn't. I don't believe it's all on device. No way.
Can you like talk and then say like, remind me to do this and then remind you to do this?
No, that's probably becoming an assistant. It's just a friend. I mean, this is like, look, here's
so
my theory.
confused.
Like, first of all, this is the oldest science fiction intro. It's not just her. It's like Blade Runner 2000. It's like all.
Yeah. Every sci-fi ever.
And people get lonely. Community is hard. You just kind of want a chorus of people cheering you on and being nice to you. And you're basically talking
But
to
it's
yourself.
not a person.
Well, there was a piece this week, I'll have to find it, that looked at the data in terms of what's being used in the App Store. And AI boyfriends are far outpacing AI girlfriends, apparently.
Woo-hoo!
Jess, we talked about that.
We
You know
got
why?
this one.
My hypothesis is I think that the AI boyfriends give you a lot of feedback for like the gratitude they have for you and all the things that you're doing as you're caring for the children every day. You're doing all the work at home. You've got the mental load.
Let's be
I
honest.
love
The
this.
AI boyfriends are actually AI girlfriends called boyfriends because they'll talk to you, right? And like text you back. So like that's the hack. That's the hack.
Yeah, it
Right?
never makes sexual
Because
passes after you.
no actual male can do those things, right? So it's really like it's just not
Yeah,
possible.
giving up hope.
But look, I think the interesting thing about this stuff is again, like on one hand, it's completely obvious, right? And like there's a bunch of lonely people, and actually, just mathematically, if everyone wants a cheering section, right, in their corner, it makes sense that it's going to be it's too expensive for it to be humans, so it's going to be a chorus of AIs cheering you on and doing that's just going to happen. Now, it could be AIs in social networks that you connect with and like tell you funny things or whatever. It can be this form factor. There's lots of form factors for it, but thematically it's going to happen. Does it have to be hardware? Like the hardware is just like.
I don't think it has to be hardware. And, we didn't talk about this last week when we were talking about Mark Zuckerberg's AI manifesto, but I think I saw he did an interview where he predicted that the bots will actually outnumber people on the meta networks, right? That there'll be billions of bots and they'll far outnumber people.
So it's funny, they also just shut down all their like super expensive celebrity bots. I think I read that in the information, right? And I think
they also just weren't good.
Yep.
Well, like they're not gonna. I mean, that's the interesting thing is like this is a volume game, right? Like, and that I think is the interesting thing about the intersection of social networking and bots is like if you think about it, if you're a really well-known person on the internet, if you post something, like you get thousands of like effectively bot comments. They're just actual humans. And they're just like, but it's random ass content. And like most of it's shit, but every once in a while it's something good, right? And like they're like, oh, that's an interesting thought or reply. And so I think the nice thing about this direction, which is kind of counter to this single friend model, is this idea that you can have very, very high volume feedback. So like you post and you're just going to get adoration and love and da-da-da. And 95% of it's going to be bots. But the reality is it's still love, right? And like you're still going to find a gem. It just doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be so precise if it's a bunch of characters. So I think the mistake of like, it's Snoop Dogg or it's the one friend is, in some ways, like it's too high stakes. Like having a best friend is really high stakes. Whereas like having a huge chorus of random ass voices, most of which is garbage, but every once in a while nails it, is like way easier. right? So I think that's where it'll start.
So what we're talking about is the true death of friends. Like friends are actually going to die in this era.
Or what I'd say is what'll happen is
Yeah.
the internet chorus will stop being like casual, not real friends will die, and we'll refocus on meaningful friends, right? Is the way I would think about it. Because
I don't know if what you're saying is true, that like bots are just forever going to be far more instant, far more plentiful, and far more personalized to give you feedback on anything you post into social media, then that suggests that, any of us that have run social media networks know that the hardest thing to do in a network to get engagement is to get the friends to respond to the thing that somebody posts.
1000%. I mean, this
and
is
so
I've been
if
saying
that's
this.
true, then friends in social media will truly die. They already are dying, but like this
I
is
think they're
maybe the death
dying,
knell.
Look, I wrote a piece about this. I think a screenshot essay at least 2 years ago, which is I think the new onboarding flow for social networks in a bot age, instead of it being like you show up, you're like, who are you? And then who do you want to follow? It'll flip around. Or you show up and you're like, hi, I'm Sam. And it's like, who do you want to follow you? Right?
Like, who do you want feedback from?
Who do you want feedback from? And then all of a sudden, you solve one of the big problems, which is like the empty thing where like you post shit and you feel shitty because no one responds to it. You just instantly get a lot of feedback. And this is the way, again, I'm not at this level, but I certainly know a lot of people. Like this happens already if you're very famous, right? You have a bot army that follows you around and gives you positive feedback. Like what Elon has, right? Is like he has a chorus of bots. So it's very logical that will come down market.
I don't understand the psychology of just knowing that a bunch of computers are responding to something.
You don't.
That
The key is to mix them with some.
That question applies to a bunch or a single, right? Like whether it's a single bot that you're talking to as a girlfriend or a boyfriend or millions of them, what's the difference? Like the psychology is the same.
My question is like, and this is, I guess is my question,
it's all
and
fake.
I think you answered it, Sam, though. I can see how if you didn't know and some were fake and some were real, I mean, and I think in a kind of sad way, it's sort of prying on your ego and all that kind of stuff, but you're sort of amplifying the feedback and emotion you get, but your brain is responding because it thinks some of them are real.
They're going to have to label them as not real. Like,
well, maybe. I mean,
I don't know, man.
No, all the regulatory stuff with AI.
Look, you effectively are like Britt, I am sure on social media, I certainly have this. You already post stuff on Twitter and you're like, I don't even know if this is real feedback or not. Even if it's real, it's like random people in Indonesia, right? Like because of how Facebook's follow graph launched, I have like hundreds of thousands of followers in Indonesia. And like, it's like hilarious you ever post publicly, or used to be, right? Because the feedback you get. And so I just think there's no difference. And it's mostly junk. But if you mix it around, right? There's some people, there's a lot of bots. It's just funny content. It's good replies. I think there's a way to do it, which actually is good for everyone.
But Sam, you're kind of making the point that like when that thing happened with the Facebook follow graph, I would argue, and I think for me personally, that is what killed Facebook for me. Like I stopped using Facebook.
So I completely agree. It's a classic, mistake issue of that era, that what happened was, like, let's turn on a public follow graph. Fine, that makes sense. But then the growth team being like, okay, we're going to like jam on it. And like, we're going to figure out who's going to click the follow button and build up follower accounts pretty indiscriminately because it's just about numbers, forced you to get a bunch of random ass followers that no one cared about, and then made posting publicly really junky. Because like, you'd be like, here's my day. And you'd have like, hello, sir. Like, thanks for, like some just the worst stuff. And that was an era of, I think, mismeasurement and actually in some ways like being way too confident in like how to drive metrics without thinking about what they meant, right? And so I do think there's a way to do it badly, but all of a sudden if those comments were like good and funny, you know what I mean, and like some of it was real and some of it was bots and it was actually hilarious to respond to, I don't know, I think there's a thing in there.
I don't know, I just want less volume.
Back to my point earlier about Apple's new keyboard in the iOS 18. I mean, that was part of the shock. I was sitting there going, wow, this is the new devil in the defaults for how 1 billion people are going to use AI every single day. This thing is recommending what I should say in response to my friend that I'm text messaging.
Well, but the funny thing
Sam,
is,
when we were texting this morning, it literally recommended something for me to say. And I was like,
but here's the thing. Here's the thing that's interesting about that, Dave, which is you end up in this thing where like it's content but meaningless. I had a funny experience like this today, which is I opened a deck from a startup someone sent. And Google very aggressively prompted being like, summarize this deck. in like it was extremely aggressive in the test, whatever test I'm in. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is fucking hilarious. Because on the other side, Google probably generated the deck, right? So like some guy probably walked in and was like, hey, I need a deck on this topic. And like it generated 50 pages. And then it sends it to me and Google's like, cool, do you want me to like go back to the thing you actually put in and like get rid of all the shit I put in front of you? It's just like this weird decompression compression cycle of nothing, right? Where it doesn't, there's no
that was my
signal in
worry.
it.
I'm sitting here going, okay, this on-device LLM that 1 billion people are going to be using in iOS 18 is suddenly going to be guiding the comments of 1 billion people towards each other. And
and you know what? They're all going to revert to the boring blah, blah. And the ones that creativity and originality are, you know, going to rule the day.
Yeah, and it's going to be like, they're going to recommend the emoji and then the emoji becomes meaning. Exactly. It's just a bunch of fucking, and this goes back to the whole like, okay, so Nvidia is a $3 trillion company selling a machine that takes meaning and generates a bunch of noise around it and then flips around and compresses back the noise to the meaning. And like, what have you done? Right? Like you've created no value. Right. And like, I do think that like, I'm obviously being a little bit flippant. Like some people have trouble expressing themselves. It's not zero, but like, that's a tough way to have a $3 trillion company when like you're...
I think it's a pragmatic take.
So I think you guys, and I'm to summarize a little bit, there are definitely some common threads between Dave, the sort of recommending power of the on device, and Google's doing the same thing now, right? In terms of autocomplete on steroids, right? I mean, they might not be taking it as far, but they're definitely going a lot further, and it's becoming in the defaults and stuff. So there's that thread to bots and just sort of social interaction being another way it's being sort of co-opted by AI in some ways. You know, talking to a virtual assistant, her style or friend style, that Britt has so sagely, you know, predicted is going to be the future, to me is something, you know, even further than that, because you're basically... I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just pure entertainment. Is that the way to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, that was the use case that we were having some... we were at a dinner here, and the person...
Guys, the Morans and the Lessons have a lot of dinners. I'd like everyone to take that away from
us. It was a business-ish dinner, and the person said that instead of listening to music for their drive from Salt Lake City to Wyoming, talked to, I think it was Pi the entire
for 5
time.
hours.
For 5 hours, instead of listening to music.
But they could have talked to themselves.
But that's not as interesting. Come on.
People in our back channel saying that they're doing the same thing and their kids are in on it now.
But that's all the people raw dogging these flights where they just stare at the moving map for 6 hours. And they're basically just talking to themselves in their head. Look, I think in the end of the day, like...
So is that bad for TikTok? Should we be shorting TikTok if...
Ooh, good question.
Ooh, that's a really interesting question.
No.
All social media, you mean? And entertainment.
Well, here's what I basically say. There's... The utility use cases of I want a perfect assistant that does everything in the real world for me. I mean, obviously, having spent a lot of time on Finn and thinking through this stuff a decade ago and on the model of her, like I strongly believe that it would be amazing. There are real business model problems with it, actually, from my experience, that have nothing to do with technology. It makes me extremely skeptical of the startups that are trying to interact in the real world as your assistant. I just
agree with that.
I've lived this, and it actually has. Everyone's like, well, now it would work because it's cheaper, and it's like. That's like actually not the problem, right?
To some extent, it's no different than the social network thing, Sam, where like we see both assistants and social apps over and over and over again that don't take into account the business model problems.
Right. And then there's the entertainment thing, which again, I actually think is like way easier, right? It's way lower bar. You are competing with Instagram and TikTok. Like if anything, I'd go the other way, Jess, which is...
And the rest of the internet.
Yeah, I'd be short this stuff because your AI girlfriend better be damn entertaining
TikTok,
to compete with literally 1 billion people producing content for your attention with an algorithmic feed. I think that's really hard, right? Like, is it completely impossible? Maybe not completely, but like that's a lot of. I mean, you basically already have, billions and billions of really smart computers working on this problem every day for you, right? And they're just
but it's like a push
computers.
versus a pull. Like when Jess goes on TikTok and she's just consuming content, TikTok isn't giving her a quip to tell you after you guys had a dinner party and you got in a debate about some topic. No.
I thought they'll listen to you and kind of just feed you things.
No, but friend will actually text you and give Jess like a good one-liner to zing Sam in the middle of dinner. And I think that's like actually really
I'm
interesting.
not supposed to be looking at my phone.
But then no one gives a shit because everyone's like, that stupid fucking app
No,
did it
she's
for
not going to
you.
tell anyone. She
Totally.
won't tell anyone. She got
I
it
don't
from
know.
them.
I don't take most pitch emails seriously anymore because they're all LLM generated, and you can tell.
Fucking men. I actually think this is like the
Did either of you ever take pitch email seriously? Dave must have at some point. Dave, I
No.
bet
Only if it's a friend of a friend.
Dave is
Friend of
literally
a friend.
notorious for never reading his email to a problematic point.
That's
like,
because
Yeah.
Dave has secret emails and he doesn't tell us about them. But we're not
I think
emailing
I've
the
known
right
them,
email.
and I think they still is just like, that's like, I actually do basically inbox zero. Now, what I do is just delete all the emails, but I kind of read like a sentence sometimes. But the thing is like, I actually think this is a broader societal problem, which is, this goes back to the whole compression, decompression, like what LLMs are good at, is they're good enough at faking humanity to the point that it tricks you, that you can't take anything seriously anymore unless you have social context around it, which means no more cold pitches. They just don't work, right? Because they're too easy and cheap to generate. So you can't deal with them. Same thing goes with resumes and cover letters. Cover letters are fucking worthless now, right? Because like they're too cheap to send. And so as a result, it's just breaking the entire ecosystem. And you go back to like a fiefdom world where I'm only going to talk to people I already know.
About so there are all these AI enabled HR platforms now for recruiting that ingest all the resumes and sort of like score the top candidates for you to actually vet. And so now there's the flip side of that, which is a resume builder that knows all the keywords that get through these different ATS databases.
It's just, everything is a war of attrition in technology.
Yeah, mutually assured destruction.
It's just a war of attrition.
But we're talking about the English language, which my business is built on. So this is interesting because it suggests we should probably not be so dependent on email if no one's going to read email.
Well, no, it's fine as long as people know that the emails from you are not. No, people are dependent on brand. So as long as your brand is that it's like you trust the information and like the information is not bullshitting, and that's completely fine. What you wouldn't do is like, hey, I'm some random thing, and just because I said it, it's meaningful. Like it's actually good for you because you already have a brand, and it means people can't trust random shit.
I will say though that so I'm programming our women's event this fall, and I'm doing all my speaker outreach on text, which gets way more reaction than email. So I think people are like just learning to tune
text
things
is
out.
the new email.
But it's also becoming flooded with this stuff too.
Yeah, it's actually really annoying. If you're going to text someone, it should be an instant urgent question, not like something you could.
It is. October 7th is instant and urgent. Yeah. Yeah.
No offense, Jess, except for your text. Your texts are fine.
I do think that this is kind of the big story, which again, like everything with this AI stuff at this point, I'll give you my favorite example. I got pitched one recently and someone's like, oh, we have a bot. I was like, I don't do this type of investing. Like, we really want to talk to you. And what it does is it listens to your live interviews. So like you're in an interview and it's like your interview assistant, right? And so it'll literally just like give you prompts and the answers to the interview questions as it's asking on the screen for like Zoom-based interviews. And you're just like, yep, that's gonna happen. Everything is a war of attrition. And the problem is like in this war of attrition, where is value being created, if at all, right? And the answer is probably none. It's actually destroying a bunch of channels. Now, new channels will arise and like the society will deal with these problems, but it's going to go back to brand and trust. And I do think, unfortunately, what it really is going to do is limit our willingness to interact with people we don't know or aren't vetted.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, I can't.
This goes back to the death of Friends.
Well, and just like, I actually think the return of like this weird, like medieval style of living, right? Where like everything is about fiefdoms and relationships, because you can't trust the unwashed masses, right? Like you can't interact in the open market.
I think this is just Sam's pipe dream.
Keep talking, Sam, and get us more sound bites that are going to get us in trouble.
God.
Feudal, unwashed.
Look, I've been worried about the return of feudalism in a lot of ways, but I think that like I actually think that's kind of where we're going, which is like we had this brief shiny moment where you could interact with anyone, right? Like all money is equal. Can trust images, so it can actually, if someone has an image of something, it's probably real, so you can source truth from anywhere. Like it was a very open system. And I think what AI is doing and technology is doing for a while, but AI is really doing is just collapsing a bunch of those systems so that we're all going to go back to trust-based networks, which in some ways are, if you have a lot of trust, fine, but it's very sad from like an open society perspective.
Isn't that what
Yes.
net positive for WhatsApp then? I've been thinking
Yes.
that like WhatsApp actually ends in the most success in social with all of this AI stuff because they're actually real communities. I mean, I've been using WhatsApp way more in the last year than ever before. I'm in all these different communities. They're like real people. They're very active conversations. And it's the only place I can go where I can say that.
I agree. It needs more of a business model, potentially, Meta shareholders might say. But it's amazing. No, I mean, I think absolutely. We've identified. So friends are over. The world's closing up.
No, close friends are never been more important.
No, close friends are fine.
To Sam's point
You
on
just host
trust,
podcasts with them. Yeah.
like what happened around robots.txt? Like at what point did we stop respecting robots.txt and that everybody just suddenly decided that it was like a sacred thing on the internet in the early days of the internet?
I don't know about
Dave,
that.
explain for people who don't maybe know what that means.
In the early days of the internet, when web crawlers were the thing after the era of, Yahoo and the portals, if you were building a web-based anything, you could define in this text file in the root directory of your website whether or not a crawler could crawl your content or not. And for the most part, it was a trust-based exercise. I mean, I do think Google largely followed this and did actually respect it. Now, it was less about content. It was more about, hey, I'm here on the internet. Google, please index me. I want people to come to me, or I don't. But now here we are in the age of AI. And suddenly you've got this problem that I was reading about this week where Anthropic's changing the name of their bots. They're creating 10 more bots. Developers are having to block this bot and this name and that name. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, okay. Can I give my take on this? Here's how I think this really has played out, which is robots.txt was always bullshit if you give a shit. People scrape whatever they want, right? The thing that did exist, Dave, and I agree with, is that high quality, real companies did respect it, right? Because candidly, there was it's like, what's a real company? You can sue it, right? Like there was a line of I'm a real company. I don't want to do things that are breaking people's terms of service, and I won't. And so everyone scraped everything, but real companies respect it. Goes into the Sam's real quite deep frustration with the OpenAI stuff. Here's the way I think what really happened, which is people like OpenAI stood on the grounds of, we're doing God's work and we're an academic research thing. We're not a for-profit thing. And that gives us the license because what we're doing is important and because we aren't doing it for profit to break a bunch of rules, right? And it was like, well, they're kind of breaking it, but it is research and we like research, so it's kind of okay. But they basically broke the social contract on that, which then has created air cover in this era for lots of startups to just be like, fuck it, we'll break the social contract on these things. So the only real way to protect this, obviously, is paywalls, and that's more formal and da-da-da-da. But the robot.txt things, I mean, it was always a kind of
But paywalls don't even help. You and I both know that. You can dump the DOM into a database.
Of course you can. But it's it's a little more there's a spectrum from did I respect robots.txt to, for instance, am I using a huge array of gray IPs, right, to get around your limitations or whatever, all the way through to I bought a subscription to your thing and clearly stole it. And I think that the social contract to I bought a subscription to your thing and clearly stole it is still mostly intact, right? And not for bad people, but for real, an engineer at OpenAI isn't going to be like, oh, that's okay, and therefore I'll do it for you. Whereas I think basically a bunch of engineers at OpenAI were we're researchers, we're not a for-profit thing, and sure, they have a robot test, but that's not really for us.
So does the toothpaste go back in the tube?
It seems like it's not, which is kind of wild to me. And even Anthropic, which I thought was sort of the Luke Skywalker to the OpenAI Darth Vader, is now in trouble for doing the same thing, right? That was the brand they were building.
Look, the rumors are even worse about what people do in the shadows, about taking all of Hollywood's films and ripping the subtitles on them to build this shit. People are doing crazy shit because a bunch of engineers believe that they're doing God's work, and so the rules don't apply. Here's my basic thing. I've been trying to convince Jess for years to chaff the information. So basically what you do is the way to defeat this stuff
a classic
is
SEM lesson idea.
Yeah, you don't.
I didn't know where he's going. There are 5 answers to that he could have given.
Tell me more, Sam.
What you basically do if you want to fuck with these guys is you don't actually shut them off. You basically try to identify them and then feed them bad shit, right?
Yeah.
So you basically feed them all the wrong stuff. Use AI. Again, this goes back to the war of attrition. It's like, you want to try to scrape me? Well, fuck you. I'm going to chaff you because I know it's you, or I'm going to guess it's you, right? And therefore, I'm going to give you fake news and bad stuff, and good luck sticking that through your pipelines, right? And so that has to be the actual long-term answer. But understandably, quality publications like Jessica's are very hesitant to do that because they don't want anything on their banner head that's fake.
Well, we're kind of in the truth business, so it's kind of problematic.
That's a lot of time.
This is how you protect the truth, is you like lace it with, for the people that are cheating, you're like, you're not going to know, right? Is kind of the way to go. Because you can't.
Dave, this is a very good point.
Cannot protect the truth, but you can't put a wall up. You instead have to kind of accept the attack and flip it around, right, in ways that are like,
you make the truth so they can't find it.
But that's the thing, is that security obscurity is not a thing, right? Like, that doesn't work.
Not anymore.
You have to hide reality in like a sea of lies, because you can't hide. The internet is too easy to find. You can't hide it in plain sight, and you can't paywall it, really, right? If for important stuff. So it's all
this
about
reminds
chaffing.
me of the escape room I did yesterday with my business team at the end of our offsite. It was great. I wish I knew the name of the place in Midtown to plug. But one of the clues was just this like piece of paper with 1s and 0s.
Ooh.
Some genius on my team was like, it's a QR code. And so then we like had a marker and we figured it out, and it was a QR code. And that was cool. That was information hiding in plain sight. Dave, I think this is a good thing to bring up. It's obviously deeply troubling. Should we talk about the Olympics before we wrap?
Oh, can we talk about gymnastics, Steven, real fast?
Is he the pommel horse guy? Or the
guy who can't see?
The guy that looks like a Silicon Valley tech nerd who wears like thick black glasses. Yeah. But then he just rips it on the pommel horse. It's like, and he becomes like, they're calling him the Clark Kent of the Olympics. And he's gotten like millions of followers just in the last 4 days ever since his event. And yeah, the men's gymnastics team placed bronze. And then, of course, the women won gold. So that's been exciting.
Have you guys also seen women's rugby?
Yeah, I saw some clips of that.
The women's rugby, there's this one play, I think it happened today or yesterday, that is like one of the most amazing feats of sports I've maybe ever seen. And it's a sport I actually didn't follow at all, but been really impressed by the U.S.
Did you learn about it
year.
from Flava Flav?
No.
I loved, you know about this?
No.
Flava Flav is like sponsoring the entire team. Like,
really?
Flava Flav is like deep women's rugby, right? Which is actually kind of great.
I think the Olympics are winning.
To riff on Flava Flav, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were in Las Vegas seeing the Lady Gaga jazz show. And we went to the jazz show, or the jazz bar afterwards in the Nomad. And Flava Flav happened to be in the audience. And then he got up on stage and did jazz drumming for like 30 minutes, which I was very impressed by. Like, he's like a really
he's making a comeback.
Astounding musician.
Yep.
Wow.
He's coming back.
I didn't know that about him.
And good job, Sam, for knowing some pop culture today.
Boom. Look at that. I also do like the Snoop Dogg commentary.
The Brazilian surfer is insane.
That was a great image.
It might be one of the best sports images ever captured in history.
I have so many thoughts, guys.
It's so great. You're against the image.
You don't like him?
You want to be anti-image? You want to be less in on the image?
Okay. First of all, and I'll try to be concise on this topic, it is an amazing image. Gabriel Medina is an amazing surfer. He is not my favorite surfer. And he happens to be the arch rival of my favorite surfer. So I don't tend to celebrate things that celebrate him, but we can separate that and recognize it's an amazing photo.
And you can take solace in no one has any fucking idea who he is. So it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sure, actually, I don't know if he's a good or bad person. He's an amazing surfer too. It's a competitive sport. But the amazing thing to me is the so-called mainstream media, which here I will differentiate from the surf media, that has now discovered that surfing is a thing and that the Olympics are being held at one of the most dangerous waves in the world. Shocker!
So crazy.
Who knew? And and so this is great for the sport,
cool,
right? So I'm cheering it on, but I'm like, if one more person sends me this article.
I like the Colin Jost covering it.
But look, but it is great for surfing. And I do love the Olympics. I think part of the Olympics is, bringing more of the masses along with what the fans kind of know, but it's like kind of amazing.
France happens to, what is this, a French Polynesia?
Tahiti.
Are we pro-colonials
Chopu
now?
is one of the most dangerous waves in the world.
It probably is the most dangerous.
It's like what? Chopu and Mavericks? It's like
Chopu's way more dangerous.
It also, they did a bunch of nuclear testing there, so you got some good radiation. There's all sorts of shit going on there.
No, it's been great. I mean, it's been great for surfing, and everyone's actually surfing really well and not dying, which is awesome. And some people in the surfing world were actually concerned about that. But also, did it remind you guys at all? And what was cool about that photo, which was so cool, it reminded me of the photo that was so maligned on this pod of the bullet coming towards Trump's face.
Yeah, it turns out camera technology is getting real good.
And it just was a reminder of how amazingly cool and powerful photography can be too. So I thought it was awesome.
For sure.
So it was very cool in that regard.
We're all about great photographers on more or less.
Can I be less in on something in the Olympics? I think the skateboarding event where they just jump on the rail is so stupid. It's like,
I did not see that.
It's ridiculous.
I haven't seen it either.
It's like, I'm sure it's hard to do, but you have these people and their big thing, and they put their big earphones on and they jump on a rail for 1 second and get a score. And I'm like, this is just a terrible form factor for content. And
is it also a subjective sport where it's scored by judges?
Yeah, well, exactly. So
gymnastics is scored by the judges.
Well, gymnastics is a tough one for me because I think it clearly deserves to be a sport, but I don't like score. I like a race where there's a clear winner and it's not subjective and it's going to last forever.
Tough for you, Sam?
No, it's not. That's why I love ski racing. But
I like Ledecky. She's a champion.
Ledecky,
whatever.
Crushing it.
I don't know. It's just it's like you won a gold medal in what? It's in jumping on a rail for 1 second. It's who cares? This is not a real thing, and I think it degrades the Olympics.
What do you think about? Wait, so Sam, what do you think of this new sport, breaking? I don't think it's
is that breakdancing?
It's I looked this up recently. The IOC has 19 priorities. It's ridiculous, 18. And they also have added since the 2000s this idea of youth appeal. I get it. They have they hired McKinsey and they told them they were losing the youth demographics. They should add youth sports. But breakdancing is not a sport. It's beautiful. You should be rewarded for doing it. But you have an Olympic gold medal in breakdancing. Why don't you win a fucking race, right? Why don't you outcompete people in a race?
Can I
not do something
the topic
pretty?
Slightly to make a plug.
Yeah, but I have a couple more Olympic questions.
It is Olympics. It's Olympics.
Okay.
But it's, the Olympics is being hosted by NBC/Peacock. And this is the first time I've actually been kind of delighted by a smart TV app that is doing stuff in a really cool way. The UI.
Do you like
is
the 4-screen thing? I like the 4-screen thing.
There's multi-view.
Cool.
There's what's on now versus what you missed. You can actually make your own highlight reel based on the sports that you like. It's the first time I've seen a streaming service like Peacock do something this innovative. And I was surprised.
I think it was both the Olympics and Peacock, right? Because I think that format changes have been needed for a very long time.
But on the flip side, I remember, don't you remember the days when we were growing up where there'd be 2 events they'd cover in the nightly news and you'd have I think that's way better, right? Because you focus the whole world.
But it's not possible anymore, Sam.
They still have prime time, right?
Yeah, but the attention is too splintered. You lost the I mean, we're all picking up dribs and drabs. I don't know. I think the Olympics following everyone down into the cult sport thing. There are parts I like because I like the sports, but I think overall is negative.
So this was my next question, Britt. So thanks for anticipating. I give the Peacock streaming experience an A-, which is actually
that's fair.
A very good
really
grade.
Good. Yeah.
And the only thing for me is it's cutting in and out a little bit. I don't know if that's happening to people.
No, it's not happening to me.
And the ad breaks are just not I know you're trying to cram the ads in there, but there's some syncing with the ad breaks that is kind of bothering me. But otherwise, you can find stuff. It's not perfect. but you can find
and then
it.
also like the actual cinematography at the like there's so many cool drones and underwater cameras and like really cool tech that are following these athletes around that I think
By
is
the way,
giving you
I was
a better
shocked
experience.
that the drones that they were using to film the opening ceremonies had no anti-rain functionality. Like the opening ceremonies looked awful because the lenses were just covered in water the entire time. Like that seems to me like
the opening ceremony thing I think kind of sucked. I mean, I don't. I think
it
the
was
boat
bad.
thing.
It
It's
was
like
truly
no.
bad.
I want to see the athletes walking proudly. I don't want to see them like
Yeah, I agree.
standing.
I agree with this entirely. Yeah.
But Celine Dion was great.
Oh, Celine Dion was really cool.
And like the thing with the fat man in the purple suit on the table, it's like there is a little bit. They're trying a little too hard.
But overall, I think it's really exciting. There's
lasers were
overall
cool.
good content. The social and the memes and all that coming out of it is excellent.
I think Snoop Dogg is great, and I love excellence.
How did Snoop happen? I'm like really curious about this. Like he's an actual commentator. It's not just like Snoop showed up in the opening ceremonies. He's like an ongoing feature.
The youth, McKinsey.
That is like whatever marketing genius worked on that did a great job. And Snoop's great. I mean, like I'm happy to watch Snoop. Like, there's almost nothing I wouldn't want Snoop to commentate.
It's true. The voice of a generation.
We can make an AI video for you with him commentating.
He crosses over. He's great. He's got a great attitude. I mean, I think he's awesome.
I agree.
Okay. Well, we're all talking about the Olympics. This is great. I mean, the world is talking. This is what the Olympics does.
Yeah, we got to get rid of the 14-year-olds winning the stupid rail thing and the breakdancing and just, go back to more
just don't
races.
watch them. Don't watch them. That isn't making Simone Biles' gold less sweet.
Yeah, I just think we need more. We need like every time you need like 5 to 10 Simones, right? Like that's like what you want, where everyone's like, that's the fucking story. And it's Ledeca, it's Simone, but like it's not enough. It's not enough, I want like 10 of those, and then I don't want any other bullshit. And I want Snoop commentating.
And you just want the credible
And I
photos.
want the guy, I really want that job of the guy who dives under to get the caps, the like kind of not good looking guy in a Speedo who picks up the caps.
Oh, yeah, I saw that story.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Well, you guys
Here's one last interesting business thing. So I was on the board of the US ski team for 10 years. And I used to argue at the annual meeting every year that we needed to change the format dramatically in order to, kind of achieve what we're seeing with this Olympics, right? Because with social media and esports and all these kinds of things, like it's very hard to gain attention, right? And the US ski team and back to the whole Flavor Flav comment, a lot of the teams have very small resources. They have, it's very difficult for them to get the story of the athletes in front of everyone. So one of the big debates that we constantly were having at the US ski team level was, should we change the athlete contracts to get access to the social media followings of the athletes in order to bring together the narrative and to create, Sam, what you were talking about earlier? Like, how do you create that unified narrative in the creator economy? I think is like still this really interesting question that hasn't been solved.
I don't think the athletes want to turn over their social media, but I don't know.
Well, but there's this question, which is like, if the national bodies are investing in helping you create the scale of your following, like how much do you own it?
Dave, do you want to come work on our creator fund? Because that's
I love the creator fund, Sam.
That's exactly the thesis. Is like we'll invest holistically, but we own holistically. I think I'm with you. It's an interesting question. I do think that I just love excellence, and I love these athletes who just crush it. It's great.
Can't tell by the way you train your children.
Welcome
Sam.
to my tiger husband. Yeah,
I know.
I just love excellence.
Okay, guys. With that, I have something very important to do, which is that my online sexual harassment mandatory training is due tomorrow, and I still have.
Do you want to do it with us? What's the first question?
There are a lot of questions, and let me be on record as saying I wholly endorse the practice of this important pursuit.
That's the first thing you have to read that aloud into the camera.
Did you read this on your podcast?
This training is the most important thing I've done all year.
I will not be the one person at the information to miss this deadline. I will also say I find, as a rule, tests that have to spend a certain number of hours completing them. Not quite sensical if you have mastered the content associated with them. So this course, I actually have to also do workplace violence. So I have 3 total hours.
Is there a lot of workplace violence at the information?
Nope, this is all mandatory California. But I frequently go through and I pick my scenario and I get my thing and it says, because you have to do this for 2 hours, go back and pick another option.
Jessica, you're starting to sound like Parker Conrad in the Zenefits era.
But I am doing all of this.
Skip it. You should do is watch the Olympics. This is a perfect. If you told me that actually everyone timed their sexual harassment and workplace violence training to the Olympics, and there was a way to integrate them, so it's like you have like a split. The Peacock app has like 2 screens of Olympics and 1 screen of your workplace violence training. If you click away
to another browser window, your clock stops on 2 hours, and there's no way I would know that because I never tried doing that. So,
do venture capital firms not have to do these?
Oh, yes,
things?
Of course they do.
I don't know. You guys have to do it. I'm gonna take it very seriously. I'm also behind. I'm honestly on a work trip, and I promised our son I'd make 2 friendship bracelets before I returned, and I've made no friendship bracelets for his business. And this morning, I awoke to a text in which she asked to see my progress.
Oh
so
my gosh.
I think he is aware.
Look, you should do your workplace training now because next generation of it is going to have camera on, mic on, show your hands. So you have to prove that you're not doing other shit and just staring at the screen, like tape your eyes open. And that's going to be the
this is an annual exercise. And I'm glad it's an annual exercise. I'm so glad it's an annual exercise, but I wish I could chat longer with y'all.
And
I cannot.
We understand.
So with that, I call this episode to an end. Thank you to everyone who
The answer to workplace violence is always choose the sword.
Sam, we're closing, Sam.
We're closing before I do end up an anecdote in some story I don't want to be a part of. Thank you to everyone, as always, to the back channel, to the viewers, to the listeners. We love getting feedback on the pod, and we'll see you here next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.